is not about religion or routine. It's about raw, real connection. You ain't got to be perfect to use it. You just got to be willing. Some people think they need a crowd, a pulpit, or a Bible in hand to pray. Now, you could be sitting in your car, in your kitchen, or on the edge of your bed. That's your altar right there. Don't wait until Sunday. God hears 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. People need to understand you don't need permission to pray. You just need to start. When life knocks the breath out of you, prayer is how you inhale again. That's your air tank when the weight gets too heavy. And let's be real, sometimes it does get heavy. That's when prayer becomes your emergency oxygen. You might not have the words, but God doesn't need grammar. He needs honesty. Some people will scroll for hours looking for a quote that makes them feel better, when they could have just sat down and talked to the one who created peace itself. You don't need external validation when you have internal access to the Creator. Stop treating prayer like an accessory. It's your arsenal. We wait until everything breaks down to suddenly remember, oh, maybe I should pray. But what if prayer was your first step, not your last resort? What if you started every plan, every problem, every opportunity with prayer? Imagine how different the outcome would look if it began with divine direction. This isn't about how loud you are or how many words you use. It's about surrender. You surrender when you realize you can't control it all. And if you are real with yourself, you know you are tired of trying to do everything alone. That's when prayer becomes your partner. That's when the shift starts happening. You have got weapons. You have never drawn because you have been too distracted by the world. But once you realize prayer isn't weakness, it's power. You stop hiding it. You start using it daily, boldly and intentionally. It becomes your reflex, not your reaction. You stop looking around and start looking up. Everybody wants prayer to be magic, like you say, a few words and boom, problem solved. But that ain't how it works. God uses prayer to surgery on your heart before He starts flipping your circumstances. He's not ignoring you. He's just doing work inside you first. That's the hard part people avoid. Have you ever noticed how after you pray consistently, your attitude starts to shift? Things that used to set you off don't even bother you like they used to? That's growth. That's God adjusting your perspective before He adjusts your position. You think the prayer is fixing your surroundings, is fixing you. Sometimes God won't remove the person or the problem because He's using them to develop your character. You are asking Him to change them, and He's focused on changing you. That humility you are feeling, that's part of the answer. That discipline that's getting uncomfortable, that's part of the solution. Prayer doesn't just make you strong, it makes you wise. It teaches you to respond instead of react. You start asking God, what are you trying to teach me through this? Instead of why me? That shift alone is a game changer. It's not always about escape, it's about endurance. You start realizing that some situations didn't need to change, you just needed to see them through a different lens. That toxic friend, you don't argue anymore. You pray for them and keep moving. That delay, you stop calling it a setback and start calling it preparation. That's the power of inner transformation. People get discouraged when the surroundings don't change right away. But check yourself. Has your heart changed? Has your faith grown? Has your patience been stretched? That's the real answer to your prayer. God is more concerned with who you are becoming than what you are getting. Once your spirit is aligned, you don't even need all the noise to quiet down. You just walk in peace. Anyway, that's when you know prayer has done its work inside you. You ain't just surviving, you are evolving. And that kind of growth, it comes from consistent, honest, gut-level prayer. God already knows what's weighing on your heart. He already sees the tears you cried in silence. He already understands the fears you haven't told us all about. But here's the truth. He still wants you to bring it to him, not because he's unaware, but because a relationship requires communication. If you love somebody, you talk to them. You don't assume, they just know. You open your mouth. That's what God wants from new connection, not convenience. It's not that your prayer is informing him. It's inviting him. You are inviting him into your situation, your struggle, your storm. You are saying, God, I want you involved in this. That's what he's looking for, not just your pain, but your participation. You can't build trust with someone you don't talk to. And prayer is how you start building that trust even when life doesn't make sense. Sometimes we stay quiet because we think God is too busy. Or maybe we think our problems aren't big enough. But let's be honest, those are excuses that come from pride and fear. Pride says, I got this. Fear says, what if nothing changes? But faith says, I'm going to talk to God anyway. Faith shows up even when the outcome isn't clear. Faith says it out loud because silence is the enemy of surrender. You have got to get used to being vulnerable with God, not just polished prayers or chalk real stuff. Tell him you are angry. Tell him you are confused. Tell him you feel like quitting. He's not intimidated by your honesty. That's when he gets the most involved, when you finally get real. He doesn't want the version of you that's trying to sound impressive. He wants the version of you that's tired of pretending. And don't think for a second that God gets tired of hearing you. That's the beautiful part. He never rolls his eyes. He never runs your call. Never puts you on hold. Every single time you come to him, he's listening like it's the first time. People might say, you already said that, but God says, say it again. Every word out of your mouth matters to him. Every tear is counted. Every sigh is understood. What happens when you finally say it out loud? Something lifts. It's like the burden gets a little lighter. Your chest doesn't feel as tight. That's not a coincidence. That's spiritual release. That's what happens when you speak to the one who can carry it all. The problem might still be there, but now you're not carrying it alone. That's why God wants to hear it from you. Because when you release it, he receives it. Don't let the fact that God already knows become the reason you don't pray. Let it become the reason you feel safe enough to pour it all out. He's not asking for perfection, he's asking for presence. He's not expecting eloquence, he's expecting honesty. You might be broken, but you are heard. And sometimes that's all you need to keep pushing forward, one prayer at a time. Worry is rehearsing the worst-case scenario in your mind over and over again. It's you playing out scenes that haven't even happened yet, letting fear be the director. And you know what? That takes energy. It takes focus, imagination, and time. But if you can do all that worrying, you can take that same energy and turn it into prayer. Because worrying doesn't solve the problem. It just magnifies it. Prayer, on the other hand, turns the problem over to someone who can do something about it. People say, I just can't help but worry, but the truth is you have trained your mind to lean into fear. That same mind can be trained to lean into faith. If you can lie in bed for hours, stressing about what might go wrong, then you can just as easily talk to God about what you want to go right. Prayer and worry are both meditations. The only difference is who you are talking to. One is with your fear, the other is with your Father. Think about how worry makes your chest tight, your stomach turn, and your sleep disappear. That's the cost of giving power to something you can't control. Now flip that prayer. Does the opposite. It releases pressure. It brings peace. It gives you clarity, not confusion. You don't have to fix it. You just have to speak it. Let your mouth open before your mind spirals. That's how you shift the atmosphere inside your head. Prayer doesn't mean pretending everything's okay. It means admitting that things aren't and you need help. Worry keeps you in a cycle of silence. Prayer breaks that silence with authority. You are not helpless. You are just hesitant. And sometimes hesitation is just fear in disguise. But when you remember who you are praying to, fear starts to shrink and faith starts to rise. The enemy loves it when you stay quiet and anxious. He loves it when you overthink and underpray, because worry steals your strength, but prayer gives it back. Worry drains your soul, but prayer fuels it. Worry says, what if? Prayer says, even if it doesn't go as planned, I know God still got me. Even if it takes longer than I hoped, I trust He's working behind the scenes. That mindset shift is where power lives. You will never stop thoughts from coming, but you can control what you do with them. Every time a word pops up, treat it like an alarm that says, time to pray. Don't just sit in it, redirect it. Say it out loud. God, I'm not okay with this. I need you in this. Make prayer your first reaction, not your last option. Don't wait until the worry is eating you alive. Talk to God while you still have control of the moment. You don't need fancy words, just honesty. You can be driving, cooking, walking, into work. Turn that worry into a whisper, and that whisper into a prayer. God isn't grading your vocabulary. He's responding to your heart. So if you have got enough energy to worry, you have got enough energy to pray. And that small shift can change how you handle everything that's trying to break you down. One of the biggest lies people believe about prayer is that they have to get right before they talk to God. They think they need to clean themselves up, memorize the perfect phrases, and come with polished words. That's not how this works. God isn't checking for perfection. He's looking for persistence. You don't have to be flawless, but you do have to be faithful. Prayer isn't a performance, it's a practice. If you only pray when you feel spiritual, you will barely pray at all. Life doesn't give you consistent emotions, but you can give God consistent effort. Even if you're tired, even if you are mad, even if you are doubting, you just show up and pray again. You don't have to be impressive. You just have to be present. That daily showing up, even when you feel like nothing's changing. That's what builds power. There will be days when your prayer feels dry. Days when it feels like it's bouncing off the ceiling, but do it anyway. That's consistency. Some prayers feel like fire, others feel like whispers in the dark. Doesn't matter. They both reach heaven. The enemy will try to convince you that silence means failure, but silence is where discipline grows. You are building your spiritual muscle every time you pray without a feeling. You don't go to the gym once and expect to be in shape forever. You keep going. Some workouts are strong, others are a struggle, but you keep going. Same with prayer. You build a rhythm. You build spiritual endurance. You don't stop because it's hard. You keep talking to God because you trust He's doing something even when you don't see it yet. Stop putting pressure on yourself to pray like a preacher or speak like a theologian. You are not trying to impress anyone. You are just being real with your Creator. If all you can say is, God, I'm tired, that's a prayer. If all you have got is help me, that's a prayer. It's not about the length of the language, it's about the relationship. That's what He's after, your heart, not your perfection. God honors consistency. He shows up in patterns. That quiet time you give Him every morning. That car ride where you vent to Him instead of the phone. That moment before you go to sleep when you just whisper His name. Those little things add up. Heaven doesn't miss a single moment. You think you are doing the minimum, but God sees it as faithfulness. Consistency in prayer is what keeps you anchored when life goes crazy. It's what holds you steady when storms hit. It's not glamorous, but it's transformational. Because even when you don't feel different, something is happening behind the scenes. Your spirit is growing. Your faith is stretching. Your trust is deepening. All because you chose to pray again and again and again. There are moments when you pray and nothing seems to shift. You ask and you wait. You cry and it stays quiet. And somewhere in that silence, the thought creeps in, maybe my prayers don't matter. Maybe they are just floating in the air, unheard and unanswered. But let me tell you something real. Your prayers are never wasted. Not a single word, not a single tear, not a single whisper goes unnoticed by God. You might not see results right away, but that doesn't mean nothing's happening. Some prayers go to work underground. Just like seeds, they take time to grow. You don't plant something today and expect to eat it tonight. Some things take weeks, others take years, but that doesn't mean it's not moving, it just means it's maturing. God might be doing something in you before he does something for you. Have you ever looked back and realized the door didn't open when you prayed for it, but now you are glad it didn't? That's proof your prayer wasn't wasted. It was redirected. Sometimes unanswered prayers are protection. You wanted the job, but he had the business in mind. You wanted the relationship, but he saw the heartbreak ahead. You thought he was saying no, but really he was saying, not this, I've got better. And here's the thing, God stores your prayers. Revelation says the prayers of the saints are collected in golden bowls in heaven. That means what you said on your knees 5 years ago, what you cried about in your car last month, what you begged for last night, it's all stored. It's not ignored. It's building something. It's doing something in the spirit. Even when it feels like nothing's shifting in the natural. You may not always see the exact answer you want, but your prayer always causes movement. It strengthens your connection with God. It changes how you handle pressure. It teaches you trust. It builds your endurance. That's why the devil tries so hard to convince you that prayer doesn't work, because he knows it does. He knows it's the most powerful weapon you have got, and he wants you to stop before the breakthrough happens. Prayer also creates peace in the middle of the process. You might not get an immediate miracle, but you will get strength. You will get wisdom. You will get clarity. That's not a waste. That's grace. That's God's scan. I'm holding you together while I work this out. Sometimes the answer is peace in your heart while you wait. And that alone is a miracle when life is chaos all around you. So when you feel like nothing's happening, pray anyway. When you feel like giving up, pray anyway. When you wonder if God's even listening, pray anyway. Because you are planting something powerful every single time you open your mouth in faith. And even if it takes time to see the fruit, your prayers are working. They are shifting something, and they are never thrown away by God. Waiting is one of the hardest things we have ever had to do. We live in a world that tells us everything should be instant. Instant answers, instant results, instant success. But God doesn't operate on our schedule. He's not rushing just because we're impatient. And in that waiting room of life, prayer becomes a strength that keeps you from falling apart. It doesn't always speed up the process, but it keeps you steady in it. When you pray, you are not just asking God to move you or asking him to keep you from breaking while you wait. You are saying, Lord, I know you haven't opened the door yet, but give me the patience not to kick it down. That's power. That's spiritual maturity. Waiting without prayer leads to worry, but waiting with prayer leads to peace. It teaches you how to hold on when there's nothing visible to hold on to. There's a kind of strength you only get when you're forced to wait. And if you pray through that waiting, you come out stronger, not weaker. You come out wiser. You come out with your faith intact. Because every time you pray while waiting, you are not wasting time. You are training your spirit. You are building up endurance in your soul. You are learning how to walk by faith and not by sight. People think the blessing is only in the outcome, but sometimes the blessing is in the becoming. Who you become while you wait is just as important as what you are waiting for. Prayer keeps your attitude right, your hope alive, and your heart from turning cold. The enemy would love for the delay to destroy you, but when you stay on your knees, when you keep showing up in prayer, you come out unshaken. And sometimes, in the way God is fixing things, you can't even see. He's aligning situations. He's building character. He's protecting you from walking into something too early. And prayer is how you stay connected while He's doing it. It's how you remind yourself, He's still with me. You might not be able to trace His hand, but prayer helps you trust His heart. There are days when the wait will make you feel forgotten. Days when you will question if it's worth it. That's when prayer becomes oxygen. You pray not just to be heard, but to breathe again, to fill your lungs with faith. When fear wants to suffocate you, that daily conversation with God, it becomes your lifeline. You might not have the answer, but you have access, and that access is enough to keep going. Prayer is not just about results. It's about resilience. It teaches you how to stand when you feel like sitting down. It helps you believe when your hope is running low. That's why you pray during the wait. Not to force God's hand, but to strengthen your heart. Because the truth is, the wait is never wasted when prayer is part of the process. There are moments in life that knock the words right out of you. Times when the pain is too deep, the confusion too thick, and you don't even know what to say to God. You sit there broke and silent with tears streaming down your face, and you wonder if He even hears you. But let me tell you something that needs to get deep into your soul. God hears tears like He hears words. Your tears have a voice, and in the presence of God, they speak loud and clear. You may not have the strength to form a sentence, but every tear that falls carries your cry to falls in heaven. Every drop is soaked in emotion you can't articulate. Grief, frustration, loss, exhaustion, surrender, and God understands it all. He doesn't need a speech. He just needs honesty. Your silence doesn't scare Him. Your breaking point doesn't push Him away. That's often where He meets you most deeply. Have you ever cried so hard that you feel like you are empty on the inside? That kind of cry that drains your whole body. That's not weakness. That's release. That's your soul pouring out what your mouth can't say. Sometimes the most powerful prayers you will ever pray are the ones with no words, just tears, groans, and deep sigh. And God gets it. He reads the pain behind the tears like a letter straight from your heart. Tears are proof that your heart still cares, still feels, still believes on some level, even if your mind is doubting, even if your strength is gone. The tears are evidence that your soul is still reaching for God, and He honors that. He collects every tear. The Bible says they are not forgotten. They are remembered, stored in heaven like precious treasures. That's how much your pain matters to Him. You don't need to force the words. You don't have to fake strength you don't have. Just show up real, show up raw. That's what God wants anyway. He's not impressed with fancy prayers. He's moved by authentic hearts. If all you can do is weep in His presence, that's enough. That's prayer, that's worship, that's surrender. And God meets you right there in the middle of your breakdown, building you back up from the inside out. And in those moments, the Holy Spirit steps in. The Bible says He intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And that means even when you can't speak, you are still being heard. You are not alone in that pain. You are not alone in that silence. You are not left to figure it out by yourself. There's a helper, a comforter, interpreting every tear, standing in the gap for you when you are too broken to pray on your own. So don't underestimate the power of your tears. Don't think for a second that they are meaningless or weak. They are sacred. They are spiritual, yet seen by God. And when life takes your voice, your tears still reach heaven with a message that God fully understands and fully responds to. Sometimes we walk around thinking we're free, but we're not. We're moving, but we're not progressing. We're breathing, but we're not living. And we don't realize there are invisible chains wrapped around our hearts, our minds, and our habits. Chains from trauma we never dealt with. Chains from lies we believed about ourselves. Chains from generational patterns that were passed down like hand-me-down clothes. And here's what's real. Prayer has the power to break those chains, even the ones we don't know are there. Have you ever noticed how sometimes after prayer you feel lighter, even though your situation didn't change? That's not a coincidence. That's something breaking off of you. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was bitterness you didn't realize you were carrying. Prayer doesn't just go after what's on the surface. It goes after what's been buried deep. Stuff you got used to carrying. Stuff you thought was part of who you are. The thing about these hidden chains is that they become so normal, you don't question them. You live with low self-worth like it's your personality. You settle for toxic relationships because that's all you have seen. You keep sabotaging your growth because something in you whispers you don't deserve this. And prayer starts digging into all that. It pulls up the lies, the wounds, the traps you didn't even know were holding you back. Prayer isn't just asking for things, it's exposing things. It's like shining a flashlight into your soul. It shows you the places you have been bound so God can begin to set you free. You start praying for a better job and God starts dealing with your confidence. You pray for a new relationship and God starts healing the trust issues you never addressed. You pray for peace and God starts cleaning out the bitterness in your heart. Prayer activates freedom. Some of these chains were put on you by life, by other people, by the enemy, but some of them, let's be real, we put on ourselves. We believe the wrong voices. We settle into dysfunction. We allowed ourselves to stay stuck. But thank God He doesn't leave us where we are. When you go to Him in prayer, even if you don't know what to say, He begins a work. Chains start breaking in places you didn't even know were locked down. And it doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes you don't even realize you have been freed until you walk back into a situation that used to break you and you realize it has no more power over you. That's when you know prayer did something. That's when you know God stepped in and unwrapped something heavy off your spirit. That's real deliverance. Quiet, powerful, lasting. So keep praying, not just to get what you want, but to break free from what you don't even know is holding you. Because the truth is, some of your greatest breakthroughs will happen in secret, behind closed doors and quiet prayers, where God is breaking every unseen chain that's been limiting us on Kesh without you even realizing it. Life will throw storms at you. Heavy rains, fierce winds, crashing waves, and sometimes those storms don't back down just because you ask them to. Prayer isn't a magic wand that always stops the thunder or clears the skies instantly. But what prayer does do is change the way you stand in the storm. It changes your heart, your mind, your spirit so you don't get swept away. That's the real power of prayer. It doesn't always alter your situation, but it always transforms you. Have you ever noticed how some people walk through storms and come out calm and steady? That's not because the storm was easier on them. It's because their prayer life prepared them. Prayer teaches you to anchor your soul when everything around you is shaking. It teaches you to hold on when the winds try to tear you apart. And when you pray in the storm, you are not just waiting for relief. You are building resilience inside of you. There's a difference between asking God to change your circumstances and asking Him to change your heart through the circumstances. Sometimes God lets the storm rage on because He's training you, refining you, shaping you into someone who can handle the next season. And if you pray with the right spirit, you will come through stronger, more patient, more trusting, more humble. That transformation is the victory prayer is really about. Prayer changes your perspective when the storm whoop change. Instead of feeling defeated, you start to see the storm as a test, a moment for growth, rather than a moment of failure. You begin to understand that storms don't define you, but how you respond in the storm does. Prayer fuels your courage, your hope, and your faith, so you can face the storm without crumbling. It turns fear into faith, panic into peace. When you pray in the storm, you invite God to be your strength when you feel weak. You open your heart to His peace when chaos tries to consume you. You hold on to His promises when the evidence says otherwise. And that makes all the difference. You may not see the storm stop, but inside a battle is won every time you choose prayer over panic. Your soul becomes unshakable. Even when your world is falling apart, some storms last longer than one. Some seasons feel unbearable, but prayer is the lifeline that keeps you connected to hope. It reminds you that you are not alone. It reminds you that God's presence is stronger than any storm. When you lean into prayer, you find a calm place inside that no storm can invade. That calm is your secret weapon. So don't pray just to stop the storm. Pray to be changed by it. Pray to be strong in the struggle. Pray to see beyond the storm to the other side. Because when you do, you will realize that the storm didn't have the power to break you after all. It only had the power you gave it. And prayer takes that power away every single time. The power you show the world doesn't just come from talent, luck, or even connections. It comes from what you do behind closed doors in private prayer. That quiet time alone, pouring your heart out, wrestling with God, seeking guidance, and building your faith. That's where your faith, your real strength, is born. Private prayer is the secret furnace that forges the public power you display when the world is watching. Have you ever watched someone who seems unstoppable, like they have it all together, and wonder how do they do it? 9 times out of 10, it's because they have been working in silence, praying hard when nobody else was paying attention. That private battle, that intimate conversation with God fuels their confidence, sharpens their wisdom, and sustains their courage. Without that private prayer, public power becomes just an illusion, temporary and shallow. Private prayer is where you get honest with yourself and God. It's where you wrestle with doubts, confront fears, and face your weaknesses head on. It's raw and real, and it's uncomfortable sometimes. But that struggle is necessary because it prepares you for the moments when you have to stand tall in front of others. Public power that isn't built on private prayer is fragile. It cracks under pressure, fades when things get tough, and it falls apart when criticism comes. There's a deep connection between what you do alone and what you can do in the spotlight. When you pray privately, you build a foundation of faith and strength that no public trial can shake. You develop clarity about your purpose and resilience against attacks. You learn to hear God's voice in the noise of life. And when it's time to step out and lead, to speak up, to make moves, that power flows naturally because it's been cultivated in prayer. Public power might get the applause, but private prayer gets the work done. You don't see the hours spent in silence, the tears, the desperate cries for help, the surrender to God's will. Those moments build a backbone of steel, a heart of grace, and a spirit that refuses to quit. And when you carry that kind of power into the world, you don't just influence others, you inspire them to dig deeper in their spiritual walk. Don't ever underestimate what happens in your prayer closet. That place is a power plant. It generates the energy, wisdom, and peace that you need for your public calling. People may admire your success, but they won't know the sweat, the struggle, or the prayers that fueled it. And that's okay, because the real reward is what God is building inside you while you are praying in secret. So if you want to be strong, bold, and effective in front of the world, start with the quiet moments alone. Build your prayer life like your life depends on it, because it does. Private prayer is the foundation. Private prayer is the training ground. Private prayer is where your public power begins. And without it, you are only borrowing strength that won't last. It's easy to fall into the trap of praying only for what we want. Praying for a promotion, a healing, a breakthrough, fixing our eyes on the outcome we desire. But here's the real deal. Prayer isn't just about changing circumstances. It's about changing us. God doesn't just want to hear you ask for things. He wants to see a heart ready to obey, even when the answer looks different from what you expected. Praying for obedience is where true power lies. When you focus only on the outcome, you set yourself up for disappointment. You become fixated on when and how, rather than how am I growing through this. But when you pray for obedience, you are saying, God, not my will, but yours be done. That's the kind of prayer that builds character and aligns your spirit with God's greater plan. It's a surrender that opens doors you didn't even know were there. Obedience is not always easy. Sometimes it means stepping out into the unknown, making tough choices, or letting go of control. But when you pray for obedience, you prepare your heart to say yes, even when it's hard. It's that yes that moves mountains. It's that yes that turns waiting into growth. And it's that yes that makes you a vessel for God's work, not just a recipient of His blessings. Praying for obedience keeps your heart soft and teachable. It helps you listen more and complain less. It reminds you that God's wisdom is greater than yours, and that His timing is perfect even when it feels like things aren't moving. You are not just praying for a result. You are praying for the strength to walk the path He lays before you with faith and trust. There's a story in the Bible about a man named Abraham who was asked to do something that didn't make sense. Sacrifice his son. That was obedience. That was faith in action, even when the outcome was unknown. When you pray for obedience, you are asking for the courage to walk that same path, to trust God even when it feels risky or uncomfortable. Sometimes the answer to your prayers isn't what you want, but it's exactly what you need. Praying for obedience means you are ready to accept God's plan, even if it means learning lessons, facing challenges, or changing directions. It's a prayer that says, I trust you more than my plans. And that kind of trust will take you farther than any specific outcome ever could. So don't just pray for doors to open or problems to disappear. Pray for a heart that will follow God through those doors and endure through those problems. Pray for obedience to His voice, to His timing, and His will. Because when your prayers are rooted in obedience, you are not just changing your situation, you are changing your life. The enemy hates a praying person. When you get on your knees, when you lift your voice in prayer, you are stepping into a battlefield that the enemy doesn't want you to win. Prayer is a weapon, a powerful spiritual weapon that cuts through fear, doubt, and every trick the enemy throws at you. And that's why the enemy fights hard to keep you silent, distracted, and disconnected from God. Think about it. Why would the enemy spend so much energy trying to keep you busy, worried, or discouraged if your prayer life didn't threaten him? Because prayer unlocks power. Prayer breaks chains. Prayer pulls down strongholds. When you pray, you tap into God's power and protection. That power weakens the enemy's grip on your mind, your emotions, and your life. And that makes you a threat to everything the enemy stands for. The enemy hates it when you pray with faith because it means you are refusing to live in fear. When you pray with persistence, the enemy knows you are building spiritual muscle that won't give up easily. When you pray with boldness, the enemy loses ground. Prayer is the front line of defense, the fortress that keeps you strong when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. Have you ever noticed how the enemy tries to distract you just when you are about to pray? That's no accident. It's a strategy. The enemy knows that the moment you start talking to God, your perspective changes, your strength returns, your peace floods back in. That's why you face sudden doubts, irritation, or distractions right before or during prayer. The enemy's goal is to stop you from connecting with God's power. But here's the good news. No matter how hard the enemy fights, prayer is your victory. The enemy can't stand against the power of a heart that's committed to prayer. When you pray, you are aligning yourself with the force greater than any challenge, any attack, or any setback. Prayer is your shield and your sword, your refuge and your weapon in this spiritual war. The enemy hates a praying person because prayer changes everything. It changes your outlook, your courage, your resilience, and your destiny. The more you pray, the more you build a life that the enemy can't touch. You become untouchable because your strength comes from above, not from the world or yourself. And that's why the enemy fears you when you pray. So don't let the enemy win by keeping you silent or distracted. Fight back with prayer. Use it like the powerful weapon it is. The enemy hates a praying person because prayer is a direct line to the one who holds all power. When you pray, you are standing on holy ground and nothing can stop you. One of the biggest misconceptions about prayer is that it has an expiration date. People sometimes feel as if they don't get an answer right away, that prayer is useless and somehow no longer valid. But let me tell you something, real prayer doesn't expire. The moment you lift your voice to God, that prayer gets recorded in heaven and it's always active. It's never too late for God to move. Never too late for your breakthrough. You might feel like you have been praying for years and nothing has changed. The frustration can pile up and doubt starts to creep in. But understand this. Your prayers are like seeds planted in the soil of God's timing. They don't just wither away because you get impatient. They are growing beneath the surface, working behind the scenes, even when you don't see it. That's why persistence in prayer is so critical. Prayer is a spiritual contract with God that never loses its value. God is never too busy or forgetful. He holds every prayer closing when the timing is right. He will answer in ways that blow your mind. Sometimes the delay is not about God ignoring you, but about Him preparing the perfect moment, the perfect solution, or even preparing you for the answer. Prayer waiting doesn't mean prayer failing. Think about it. How many times have you looked back and realized that the things you prayed for didn't come when you wanted them, but they came exactly, many of the gods dead, exactly many of them, and many took it all on its own. As God's timing working perfectly behind the scenes, the clock of heaven ticks differently from our earthly clock. Your prayer is alive, active, and effective, even in the waiting. When you pray, it's like sending a message up a chain that never breaks. No matter how long it takes, the message is delivered and received. God is always listening, and your faithfulness and prayer keeps that line open. You may not see immediate results, but that doesn't mean your prayer is lost. It means you are still in the process of a divine work unfolding. Sometimes the reason your prayer feels like it's expired is because you stopped praying for it. You gave up too soon, thinking God forgot or doesn't care. But God cares deeply, and your perseverance and prayer shows Him you are serious. That persistence matters. It fuels your faith, shapes your character, and sets you up to receive God's best. So hold on to your prayers, no matter how long it takes. Don't throw them away or give up on them because you don't see instant answers. Prayer doesn't expire, is alive and powerful every day. You keep believing and calling on God. Your breakthrough is waiting on the other side of your persistent prayers. When you pray, you are not just whispering wishes into the air. You are putting heaven on notice. Prayer is a signal, a powerful alert that says, God, I'm serious. I'm reaching out. I need your intervention. It wakes up heaven's attention and stirs the power of God to move on your behalf. You've got to understand that prayer isn't just some casual act. Practice the way we trigger divine action. Every time you get on your knees or bow your head, you are sending a message that shakes the spiritual realm. It's like ringing a bell that can't be ignored. God hears that bell loud and clear. Prayer demands a response because it's a declaration that you are relying on a higher power. When you pray, you are saying, I'm not doing this on my own. And that honesty brings heaven closer to your situation. Sometimes people feel like their prayers don't matter because their circumstances are too big, too complicated, or too messy. But that's exactly when prayer matters the most. When you put heaven on notice, you are calling in reinforcements. You are asking for the help that only God can provide. And no matter how big the problem, no matter how deep the trouble, prayer announces to heaven that your battle is real and your faith is active. Think about it. Prayer is the first step in every miracle. Before anything changes in your life, heaven has to be alerted that something needs to change. Prayer sends an alert, loud and clear. It's the spiritual equivalent of sending out a distress signal, and God is always ready to respond to call. The power of that call is what changes situations, breaks chains, and makes the impossible possible. Prayer puts heaven on notice that you are ready to receive what God has promised. It opens doors that no one else can open. It breaks down walls that seem unmovable. When you pray, you are opening a channel for heaven's power to flow into your life. You are moving beyond what you can see or control and inviting divine intervention. But here's the truth that will shake you to your core. If you don't pray, heaven won't move. Prayer is the trigger for action in the spiritual realm. It's the signal that gets God's attention and releases His power. Without it, you are trying to fight your battles alone. With it, you have a direct connection to the Almighty, and that changes everything. So don't ever underestimate the power of your prayers. Every time you pray, you put heaven on notice that you are ready for change, ready for breakthrough, and ready to walk in God's power. That's how prayer turns the impossible into possible. One thing that often trips people up about prayer is the idea that you have to have fancy, perfect words, like you are on some stage and got to sound impressive. But let me tell you, God isn't listening for how well you speak. He's listening for a real heart. Your prayers don't need to be polished or perfect. They just need to be honest and straight from where they are inside. Sometimes people think they need to use big words or some flowery language or even quote scripture to make their prayers count. That's a lie that keeps people from praying altogether. God isn't impressed by how many words you say or how fancy they are. What He wants is for you to show up with your real self. Your struggles, your doubts, your hopes, your fears, all laid out honestly before Him. Imagine a child talking to that parent. They don't use complicated language or rehearsed speeches. They just say what's on their mind. That's the kind of prayer God wants from you. Raw, real, and real time. It's your heart reaching out, not your vocabulary. When you speak from your heart, that's when the connection deepens and the power flows through your words. Prayer isn't about impressing anyone. It's about expressing yourself honestly to God. It's a conversation with the one who already knows you better than anyone else. So stop worrying about getting the words right and saying everything perfectly. Just open your heart and speak the truth. Say what you feel, even if it's messy, broken, or confusing. God understands and welcomes every word. There's a freedom that comes when you realize you don't have to perform in prayer. You don't have to sound spiritual or have all the answers. You just have to be real. That's the power of prayer. It's a place where you can be completely honest and still be loved and heard. That kind of authenticity moves heaven in ways formal words never will. The more real your prayers are, the more God can work through them. A genuine heart breaks through barriers, softens resistance, and invites God's presence in powerful ways. When you pray from your heart, you are not just speaking words. You are opening a door for God to move deeply in your life. So forget the idea of fancy prayers. Forget the pressure to sound perfect. What matters most is that you come with a real heart. That's the secret to a prayer life that's alive, powerful, and unstoppable. Life will throw storms at you, storms that shake your foundation, that darken your skies and make you question everything. But here's the truth. Prayer will outlast every one of those storms. When the winds howl and the rains fall, prayer is the anchor that holds you steady. It's the quiet power in the eye of the storm that won't let you drift away or give up. You have got to lean into that truth with everything you have got. Storms come in all shapes and sizes. They might be financial struggles, broken relationships, health issues, or moments when you feel completely alone. But prayer is the one thing that never fails, never fades, and never loses strength. No matter how fierce the storm is, it's your lifeline, your direct line to the Creator. And it's designed to shine even when everything around you is falling apart. You see, storms test our faith. They push us to our limits and force us to choose where our trust lies. When the storm is raging, you can choose to panic or you can choose to pray. Prayer reminds you that you are not in control, but the one who is. And that reminder is powerful. It gives you peace in the chaos and hope in the darkest moments. What's incredible about prayer is that it's not dependent on the storm's timeline. Storms come and go, but prayer lasts. You might feel worn down, tired, or like giving up, but prayer doesn't give up on you. It keeps working behind the scenes, moving heaven on your behalf, preparing your breakthrough, even when you can't see it yet. Prayer outlasts every doubt, every fear, every tear you shed in the storm. It's the quiet power that says, I'm still here, I'm still trusting, I'm still believing. And that steadfastness is what will get you through. When the storm finally passes, it won't be because the wind died down. It will be because prayer gave you the strength to keep standing until the sun came back out. Remember, storms aren't forever. They have an end. And prayer is a force that carries you to that end. It won't stop the storm from coming, but it will change how you face it. Prayer builds resilience, fuels your faith, and reminds you that no matter what, you are connected to a power greater than the storm. So when you find yourself in the middle of a storm, don't despair. Turn to prayer. Hold on to it with everything inside you, because prayer will outlast every storm and bring you into the calm on the other side. It's one thing to pray, but it's a whole different level when you believe what you prayed for. Prayer is powerful, but faith is the fuel that makes those prayers come alive. You can't just send a prayer out there and then doubt it's going to happen. You have to believe with everything in you that what you ask for is already on its way. That kind of belief moves mountains. When you pray without belief, it's like planting seeds in dry soil. Nothing will grow. But when you believe in your prayers, you are watering those seeds, giving them life and preparing the ground for a harvest. Your belief activates the power of prayer in a way that mere words cannot. It's that deep, unwavering faith that says, I'm not just asking, I'm expecting. Belief changes your attitude while you wait. It keeps you hopeful and focused when things get tough. Because the truth is, sometimes the wait is the hardest part. You might not see the answer immediately, but believing what you prayed for helps you stay grounded. It reminds you that God is working even when you can't see it. It turns waiting into a season of preparation, not frustration. People give up all the time because they don't believe in their prayers. They pray, then doubt, question, and before they know it, they are done. But belief is what keeps you persistent. It's what keeps you coming back, praying again, trusting again, and standing firm even when the odds look stacked against you. Belief is the secret weapon in your prayer life. When you truly believe, you begin to act differently. Your mindset shifts from worry to trust. You carry yourself with confidence because you know God has heard you. That confidence isn't arrogance. It's the assurance that your prayer is powerful and effective. That assurance pushes you to walk boldly into your future with faith leading the way. Believing what you prayed for also means you refuse to be shaken by setbacks. You don't let disappointment steal your faith. Instead, you hold tight, knowing that every no or not yet is part of the process, not the end. Your belief holds the door open for miracles, breakthroughs, and blessings that are coming your way. So don't just stop at prayer. Take it a step further. Believe in your prayers like your life depends on the